Still remember the night Vivian stood in my kitchen wearing my old Rideau Canal half-marathon hoodie, the one I hadn't seen in 2 years because she'd borrowed it at my sister's birthday dinner and never given it back. She was holding a mug of tea she hadn't touched, and when she finally looked up at me, she said it so quietly I almost missed it. "I think I've forgotten how to want things for myself." That sentence did something to me, not because it was sad, though it was, but because Vivian Cho had never been a woman who forgot anything. She had once memorized the entire wine list at Canoe in Toronto just to argue with the sommelier about a Niagara Riesling pairing. She had corrected a tax lawyer at a dinner party politely, accurately, and then apologized to the lawyer after in a way that somehow made him feel grateful. So when she said it, standing there in my kitchen in Westboro with snow tapping the window, I knew she wasn't being dramatic. She meant it. But it started before that. It started 6 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday morning in November, when my sister Dana called me while I was scraping ice off my truck in the driveway. "Don't say anything that sounds helpful," Dana said instead of hello. I got the driver's side clear and moved around the hood. "Good morning. I need you to listen and then agree." Dana only spoke like that when she'd already decided something and wanted a witness. I tucked the phone against my shoulder and kept scraping. "What did you decide?" "Vivian's coming back to Ottawa." I stopped. I had known Vivian Cho since I was 19. She had been Dana's roommate at Carleton, which meant she was always in our apartment on Bronson, always at our parents' place in Kanata for holiday dinners, always somewhere in the background of every important thing that happened in my early 20s. She made fun of my cooking, stole the remote, and once told me my taste in music was what happened when a person gave up on having a personality. Then she got recruited by a firm in Vancouver, got engaged to a man named Preston who worked in commercial real estate and had excellent teeth, and became the kind of person people mentioned with words like driven and established. I'd seen her maybe 4 times in 3 years. Christmas once, Dana's convocation, a long weekend when she and Preston came through and spent most of it on his phone. Dana went quiet on the line. She had to take a leave from the firm, she said. Health stuff. The serious kind. And Preston's not in the picture anymore. I looked at the ice on the windshield, at the crack running through the lower passenger corner that I'd been meaning to get fixed since September. Gone how? Gone as in he left 3 weeks after her diagnosis. Sent a very measured email about needing space to process. I didn't say anything. Some things don't deserve commentary right away. She doesn't want people making it into a whole thing, Dana said. Mom already cried at Thanksgiving dinner over it, which Vivian found out about and is now furious about, so we're all pretending that dinner went normally. I'm not going to ambush her. I know. I'm warning you because your face does that thing. What thing? Where you're thinking something kind and it shows up like an accusation. I couldn't argue with that. I'd been told the same thing by 3 separate people. I saw Vivian for the first time that Saturday at her parents' place in Orleans. She was carrying a cardboard box from her rental car to the front porch, moving slow but with that same forward-leaning determination she'd always had, like momentum was a moral position. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut close around her jaw. She had on an oversized fleece and dark track pants, and she was wearing her old Blundstones that she'd owned since university. When she saw my truck pull up to the curb, she stopped and tilted her head. They sent the truck, she said. Dana must be more worried than she's letting on. I got out and looked at the remaining boxes in her back seat. You need a hand, or are you monitoring the boxes from a supervisory distance? I was evaluating the most efficient loading sequence. There are 4 boxes. Efficiency matters at scale. For 1 second, she was exactly herself, sharp and dry and fast. Then a neighbor came out across the street and looked over with that particular expression people wear when they already know the story and want you to know they know it. And I watched Vivian's shoulders pull in just slightly, like a door easing shut. I grabbed 2 boxes and said nothing. That became the arrangement quickly. I noticed things. I didn't make them into topics unless she did. I helped carry everything inside while Vivian stood in her parents' front hallway directing traffic. That one goes to the back room. No, the other back room. There's only one back room. There's only one back room. Then you found it. Her mother, Helen, came in from the kitchen with tea and immediately started tearing up, which Vivian shut down with a single look that was almost impressive in its precision. Mom, I'm fine. It's just boxes. I know, I just. Tea's great, thank you. Helen retreated. Vivian looked at the ceiling briefly, then back at me. If one more person cries in front of me, I'm moving to Yellowknife. Property's cheaper there too. Don't make good points right now. I carried a small bookshelf upstairs while she told me where to put it, changed her mind, and then told me where to put it again. When I picked up one end without asking, she stiffened for just a second and then gave me a look. I can help carry things. I know. Then why the hesitation? Dana told me if you hurt yourself, I have to hear about it until April. She narrowed her eyes, coward. Strategically risk-averse. She let me take the heavier side. The last thing she asked me to do was help her move a small dresser near the window. The room still had her old swim meet ribbons tacked along one wall, faded blue and red from the 90s. While I worked the dresser into place, she sat on the edge of the bed and watched. You still do that thing with your jaw when something's crooked, she said. It's slightly off level. It's a dresser, not a load-bearing wall. Principle's the same. She almost smiled. Then, too quickly, it doesn't matter what's level when you don't know how long you're staying somewhere. She said it lightly. I kept my eyes on the dresser. Over the next few weeks, I found excuses to be around. Dana sent me with groceries twice. I fixed a kitchen faucet that had been dripping since the fall. I helped her dad, Gerald, replace a section of fence that had come down in a windstorm in October, and he'd been ignoring it the way men of a certain generation ignore things they're not ready to deal with. Then Vivian started showing up at my place. The first time was a Wednesday evening. She knocked, which she'd never done in the Carlton years, and when I opened the door, she was holding a bag of groceries and looked slightly annoyed about it. I made too much soup, she said. I looked at the bag. You made soup. I was bored. Are you going to let me in, or do you need a written invitation? I stepped back. She came in, looked around my apartment on Rochester, set the bag on the counter, and started finding things in my cabinets with the quiet competence of someone who had once lived in worse organized spaces and knew how to navigate them. The soup was very good. I told her so. I know, she said. That's not the same as a compliment. Why not? Because you'd say it was good even if it wasn't. Not true. I told you in 2011 that your pasta was undersalted. She pointed at me, and I've never forgiven you. She kept coming back, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit on my couch and watch television without having to perform being fine for her parents. She still made jokes, still argued about whatever was on screen, still called me Callum when she wanted to sound unimpressed and Cal when she was actually talking to me. But there were things I noticed that I didn't say anything about. The way she angled away from reflective surfaces without seeming to realize she was doing it. How she wore loose layers even indoors when it wasn't cold. The pause that happened when someone mentioned Vancouver, like she was waiting to see if it would hurt, and it always did. So I did what I was good at. I fixed the things she let me fix. A sticky window latch, a leaking radiator valve in her parents' back bedroom, her old bike, which had a cracked brake cable and a rear tire that had been soft since the previous summer. One evening in late November, I drove past her parents' place on my way back from dropping off a client file in Gloucester. The porch light was on. Vivian was sitting on the front steps in her big fleece and wool socks and her Blundstones, which she'd put on over the socks in a way that should have looked wrong and somehow didn't. She had a glass of wine and was staring at the street with an expression I recognized. I had seen it before. Not on Vivian, but on people who were alone in a specific way that wasn't about being by themselves. I slowed without meaning to. She looked up. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just watched me slow down and pull over, and didn't tell me to keep going. I walked up the path with my hands in my jacket pockets. You lose something. My tolerance for HGTV, she said. My parents have been watching it for 4 hours. Is that a Canadian problem or a parent's problem? At this point, it's a Vivian problem. She pulled her knees up and looked at my empty hands. You didn't bring anything. I didn't plan this. Amateur. I went back to the truck, found the bottle of tossed Chardonnay I'd bought at the LCBO on the weekend for no particular reason, and grabbed 2 paper cups from the center console that were technically clean. When I came back, she raised an eyebrow. Those are paper cups. I run a full-service operation. That's not what full service means. I poured wine into both cups and sat down on the step below her, close enough to be there, far enough that she had room. She wrapped both hands around the cup. Ottawa in November had that specific cold, the dry kind that settles in the back of your throat and makes everything very quiet. Somewhere down the street, someone was still using a snowblower at 8 in the evening. For a while, neither of us said anything. That had always been one of the things about Vivian. She could hold a silence, like it was furniture. She arranged it, used it, and didn't feel the need to fill it. Finally, she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "You have to not answer like you're being careful." I looked at her. "That's going to be hard." "You're less careful than you think. It only looks careful from the outside." "Okay." She turned the cup slowly in her palms. Her nails were short, no color, and her hands looked colder than the temperature quite explained. "When you look at me now," she said, "what do you see?" I didn't answer right away. The fast answer was available. Something easy, something that landed gently and dissolved before it could mean anything. She looked good. She looked like herself. She looked tired, but fine. But Vivian hadn't asked an easy question. She was asking whether everything that had happened to her in the past year had moved to the front of her, like a label she couldn't take off in public. I took a breath. "I see, Vivian," I said. Her mouth moved slightly. "That's the careful answer." "I'm not done." She went still. "I see the person who showed up at my door with soup she'd made because she was bored and acted like she was doing me a favor. I see someone who corrected my parallel parking in a superstore lot last week and was right. A small exhale from her. I see that you're tired. I see you've been hurt in a way that doesn't go away just because you decide it should. I see that you're different from the person who stole my remote for 3 years and told me my couch was a cry for help. Your couch was a cry for help." I replaced it. "I know, I saw, it's better." She looked down into her cup, then, quieter, "But I don't see the damage first. That's not where my eye goes when you walk in." Her face changed. Not dramatically. She didn't cry or turn away. She just blinked once and then looked at the street fast, the way you do when someone says something that gets to the place you've been guarding. After a moment, she said, "Preston did." I kept still. "Not right away," she said. "At first, he was very good at it. The appointments, the research, the right things to say in front of doctors. He bought me a weighted blanket because he read it helped. He called my mother every week. He held my hand the right amount in public." She paused. "Then recovery got long and unpleasant in the way that isn't in any of the pamphlets. I was exhausted and short-tempered, and I didn't want to be touched half the time. And then I'd want to be close to him, and he was already pulling back." The snowblower down the street finally stopped. The quiet that followed was very complete. He started working late, traveling more, started sleeping on his side of the bed so thoroughly it felt deliberate, stopped asking how I was feeling, which was a relief actually, until I realized he'd stopped asking because he'd stopped wanting to know. My jaw tightened. She glanced at me. "Don't do that thing where you get angry and I have to manage your reaction." That was fair. I looked at the step between my feet. "The worst part wasn't him leaving," she said. "It should have been. It wasn't." She took a sip of wine. Her hand wasn't quite steady. "I was on the phone with Dana in the kitchen one night. He thought I was in the bath. I heard him on the balcony. He was talking to his brother. I wasn't trying to listen." Her voice didn't waver, but it thinned. "He said he loved me. He said he loved me. He said he felt terrible. He said no one would understand how hard it had been for him." She pressed her lips together. "Then he said he didn't recognize me anymore." The porch was very quiet. I heard a car pass on the next street, the distant sound of a train somewhere east of the river. Vivian's cup tapping her knee because her hand had started to shake, just slightly, and she wasn't going to mention it. There were things I wanted to say, loud things. I knew they'd feel good for about 15 seconds and then she'd have to clean up after them. That's about him, I said, not you. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Maybe? Not maybe. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but her expression was closer to angry than sad, which was more Vivian. Knowing whose fault something is doesn't change what it does to you when the person who promised forever starts looking at you like you're a problem he's trying to solve ethically. I had nothing for that. Because she was right. I could tell her Preston was a coward. I could tell her he didn't deserve the space he took up in her head. All of it might have been true, and none of it would pull that sentence out of her. I set my cup down. I'm not Preston. She whispered, I know. That's what makes it complicated. Something shifted between us. She looked away toward the street, but I'd already seen it. The wanting and the fear of the wanting, and the part of her that didn't trust warmth anymore because warmth had a way of becoming careful distance. I stood up. She tensed. Where are you going? Home. You can come if you want. You haven't eaten and it's getting cold. That's not a dinner invitation, that's a logistical observation. I have ingredients. For what? Probably grilled cheese, maybe eggs. She stared at me for a second. Then she stood up, wine in hand, and said, You are a deeply unromantic person. I have real plates. That is a low bar. Come anyway. She came. 15 minutes later, she was sitting at my kitchen island in my hoodie because she'd been cold in the truck, with her wine glass in front of her now because I'd found actual glasses, watching me figure out what was in my fridge. The apartment was warm. The light over the counter was the yellow kind that makes everyone look like they're in a film about something soft. She sat with her feet on the rung of the stool and her chin propped on one hand and watched me work with the particular expression she had when she was about to say something. You have 3 types of mustard, she said. I cook. You're making grilled cheese. Versatility is important. She almost smiled. I got the bread in the pan and she watched me like I was doing something that required monitoring, which in her mind I probably was. Then the smile faded, slowly, and she didn't fight it, which told me something. Her eyes moved to the window over the sink, caught her reflection, and moved away fast. I shifted slightly, not to redirect her, just so she'd have somewhere else to look if she needed it. She didn't take the out. Instead, she pulled her sleeves down over her hands, sat very still for a moment, and said, Can I show you something? The pan was still going on the stove. I reached over and turned the burner down without taking my eyes off her. You don't have to show me anything. I know. She said it quickly, like the argument was already over inside her. That's why I'm asking. I set the spatula down and turned around. Vivian. Don't. Don't what? Say my name like that, like you're giving me permission to change my mind. I am giving you permission to change your mind. She looked at me with that flash of the old Vivian in her face, annoyed and clear-eyed and almost amused. I know where the exit is, Callum. Okay. She slid off the stool. I understood then that she was afraid in a way that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with what she'd learned about what happened after you showed people things. She stood in my kitchen in the overhead light, pale and steady, one hand flat against the front of the hoodie. I kept my eyes on her face. She took a breath, then another. Preston saw me once, after. Her voice was very quiet and very even. He said all the right things. He said it didn't matter. He kissed my forehead. A pause. Then he stopped being in the room when I got dressed. Like if he wasn't watching, it wasn't something he had to have an opinion about. I felt something move through my chest. I kept it there. She lifted the hem of the hoodie, just slightly. I am not going to describe it in a way that makes it cinematic. It wasn't. It was a kitchen in Ottawa on a Wednesday night in November with bread going cold in a pan and a bottle of Chardonnay on the counter, and a woman showing me the part of herself she had learned to hide because one person's discomfort had taught her that it needed hiding. I looked long enough to understand what she was giving me. Then I looked back at her face. Her eyes were on mine, watching for the door to close. She swallowed. Then she said, very quietly, I think I've forgotten how to want things for myself. Write in the comments. Do you think Vivian was wrong to let Preston's reaction become the thing she measured herself by? Or is that almost impossible to avoid when someone you trusted showed you their limit? I didn't rush to answer. I knew not to. The fast answer would have felt like I was trying to get it over with, and she would have known. So I took one step closer. She didn't move back. Another step. Then I stopped, close, but not in her space. I haven't forgotten, I said. Her face went still. What you want? I haven't. I'd been paying attention for a long time. I kept my voice level. Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because Preston was wrong and I want to prove a point against him. I'm not interested in being the guy who shows up after the bad one to collect the credit. She made a sound, quiet and sharp. I'm here because I've been trying to figure out for about 4 years how to tell you that I notice you when you walk into a room, and I kept not saying it because you were with someone, and then you weren't, and then everything happened, and it still felt like the wrong time. And I'm done waiting for the right time because I don't think it exists. A tear went down her cheek. She wiped it away immediately and looked irritated about it. That's a very long sentence, she said. I'd been holding it for a while. Cal, 94 Romo. Yeah, I'm not the same as I was. I know. I'm not asking for the Carlton version of you. I don't want the person you were before any of this. I want the one who shows up at my door with soup and acts inconvenienced about it, the one who corrected my parking in a grocery store lot, the one standing in my kitchen right now giving me the most skeptical look I've ever received in my life. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. I'm serious, I said. You are not what happened to you, and you are not what Preston decided to do with what happened to you. You are not a before and after. You're just you, and I have always paid attention to you, and I would like to keep doing that if you'll let me. Her face did something complicated. She pressed her lips together, held it, then let go. We'd have to go slow, she said. I've been going slow for 4 years. That's not slow, that's negligent. There. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. Her eyes were still wet, but something in them had shifted. Like a window that had been painted shut, and then someone got a putty knife along the seam, and it finally gave. She took one step forward and put her forehead against my shoulder. That was all. Just that. I put my arms around her, not carefully, not like she was something that might break. Like she was someone who had been through something hard and was still here, which she was. She didn't cry for long, and when she stepped back, her face was annoyed in that specifically Vivian way, the way that meant she was embarrassed about having felt something. Your grilled cheese is cold, she said. I'll make another. It was barely edible the first time. It was perfectly fine. It was pale, Callum. Bread requires commitment. I made another sandwich and burned one side of it, which she pointed out immediately and which I explained was caramelization, which she explained was not what caramelization meant. We ate at the counter. The radio was on low, one of those CBC evening programs that's mostly people talking quietly about things that happened in small towns. She finished her wine and switched to water and sat there in my hoodie with her feet back on the stool rung. And after a while she looked less like someone maintaining her composure and more like a person who had found a room she could breathe in. Eventually she said, I don't want to drive home tonight. You don't have to. She looked at me carefully. This doesn't mean. The couch folds out, or you can have the bed and I'll take the couch either way. You're not sleeping on your own couch. It's fine. Callum. Vivian. She gave me the look. I gave it back. She rolled her eyes. Bed, she said. I'll take the bed. You're too tall for the couch anyway, and I don't want to feel guilty about it. You? Guilt? I contain multitudes. Stop smiling. I found her a spare toothbrush, still in the packaging from a bulk Costco run the previous winter, and a towel from the hall closet. She took them with the particular dignity of someone who had decided to be fine about this and was going to be fine about it completely on her own terms. She slept with the door mostly closed. I stayed on the couch under the blanket my aunt had made me for my 30th birthday and looked at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the building settle and the occasional sound of a snowplow going by on Rochester. Because when you've told someone the truth about what you feel, and they're in the next room, and you're not sure what any of it means yet, sleep takes a while to arrive. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee, which I hadn't expected. I sat up carefully and found Vivian at my kitchen counter in a different version of the same outfit, having clearly located my coffee grinder and the bag of Ethiopian beans I'd bought at the market on the weekend. "You had good coffee," she said without turning around. I respected that. "Good morning. The quality of your coffee is actively in tension with the quality of your cooking, and I find that confusing. I'm a complex person." She turned around and handed me a mug. She'd made it the way I took it, which she remembered from years of watching me make it at family dinners. That detail got to me more than I let on. She sat across from me with her own mug, and for a while we both just had coffee and didn't talk about the night before, which felt like the right way to start that day. Then she set her mug down. "Do you remember what you said last night?" "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." She traced the rim of the mug with one finger. "Did you mean it?" "Yes." She looked up. "The part about not wanting the before version?" "Yes." "The part about paying attention?" "Yes." She held my eyes for a moment. Then she nodded, once like she was filing something away. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Don't make that face." "What face?" "The one where you think you've won something." "I'm not making that face." "You are a little." I was a little. I looked down at my coffee. We went slow. She kept coming over, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but her coat and her opinions. Some evenings I drove her home the long way along the river just because it was December in Ottawa, and the lights were on in Gatineau across the water, and neither of us was in a hurry. I met her at a coffee shop on Bank Street one afternoon when she had a follow-up appointment nearby and didn't want to go home right after. I didn't ask how it went. She told me when she was ready, which was halfway through her Americano, and I listened and didn't try to fix the parts that couldn't be fixed. A month after that night, I took her to dinner at a small Italian place on Elgin that she'd mentioned once in passing 6 months ago, which she noticed immediately. "You remembered that. You said the lighting was good and the noise level was tolerable. Those are strong recommendations from you." "I have high standards." "I know." She was quiet for a second. "That's a little bit alarming, actually." "Which part?" "That you remembered." "I pay attention." I said that. She looked down at the menu. Her jaw did something small, and she blinked once, and then she was back, reading the pasta section like she hadn't just been caught off guard by being known. After dinner, we walked along the canal, which was frozen and lit for the winter. There were still a few skaters out, even at that hour, moving in both directions with the ease of people who'd been doing it since they were 4. She had her hands in her coat pockets and I had mine in mine, and we walked close enough that our shoulders touched sometimes when the path narrowed. Near one of the bridges, she stopped to look at the ice. Then she reached over and took my hand. She didn't say anything about it, just held it, her fingers between mine, her grip firm and certain. We stood there for a moment. "I thought tonight might feel strange," she said. I waited. Like I was supposed to be someone I'm not anymore. She watched a skater go by. It didn't. Good. I feel like an idiot because of how much I've been looking forward to this. My chest did something unhelpful. I didn't move toward her, just waited until she turned and looked at me, and then I kissed her. Simple, unhurried, cold air and warm faces on a frozen canal in December. When she pulled back, she looked almost irritated, which was her version of overwhelmed. "New memory," she said. "New memory." We made more of them after that. The first time she wore a fitted jacket to one of Dana's dinners, and when my mother said she looked wonderful, Vivian said thank you and meant it instead of deflecting. The first time she laughed loudly at something on TV, that full Vivian laugh that she'd been keeping small and controlled for months. The afternoon she let me take a photo of her on the Rado pathway, squinting into the winter sun with her collar up, looking like herself. Preston called her once in February. We were at my kitchen table with tax documents spread between us because she was helping me organize a filing I'd been avoiding, which was her idea of a good afternoon, and also, I suspected, a way of feeling useful in a situation she could control. Her phone lit up on the table. She looked at it. All the color left her face for about 3 seconds. Then she turned it face down. "I'm not letting him have today," she said. She picked up her pen and found her place in the document. I reached over and moved the phone off the table entirely, put it on the counter, and went back to the column I'd been adding. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Vivian didn't become the person she'd been before. That was never the point. She was different, and some days the difference was heavy and some days it wasn't, and some mornings she was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with me, and I'd learned to let that be what it was. But she laughed more. She wanted things and said so. She made plans more than 3 days out, which sounds small, until you understand what it means to start believing again that the future is something you get to have. Some people say things begin with a single moment, a first date, a first kiss, a door opening at the right time. For us, it was a November night on a cold porch in Orleans with paper cups and a bottle of wine I'd bought for no particular reason, and a woman who asked me what I saw when I looked at her. And I told her the truth. I think about the night Vivian sat on her parents' porch in wool socks and Blundstones, holding a paper cup of wine I'd poured from a bottle I hadn't planned to bring. And I think about how close I came to just driving past. That's the part that stays with me, not the big moments, the almost. There's something I've come to understand slowly, the way you understand things that can't be rushed. That the way we treat people in their worst seasons is not separate from who we are. It is exactly who we are. Preston wasn't a bad person who made one bad decision. He was a person who, when the moment asked something of his character, found out his character had limits he hadn't known about. That's not a judgment. That's just what happens when life tests the gap between who we think we are and what we actually do when it costs us something. Vivian is one of the sharpest people I've ever known. She could read a room, read a contract, read a person faster than most people could form a first impression. But intelligence doesn't protect you from the specific damage of being looked at differently by someone who promised not to. She knew, rationally, that Preston's discomfort was about him. She said so herself, sitting on those porch steps. Knowing whose fault something is doesn't change what it does to you, and I think that's true. Wisdom isn't just knowing the right answer. It's having the patience to let the right answer actually land, to let it become something you feel instead of just something you can say. What I kept coming back to, all those weeks of fixing fences and leaking valves and sticky window latches, was this. Showing up is a choice you make before you know what showing up is going to cost. I didn't know what Vivian was going to tell me that night in my kitchen. I didn't know she was going to show me something she'd been hiding since Vancouver. I just knew she was sitting on those steps alone, and there was a difference between giving someone space and leaving them stranded inside it. That difference mattered. It still does. The hardest thing Vivian did in this whole story wasn't letting me in. It was staying. Getting up the next morning and making coffee in my kitchen. Coming back the week after. Choosing, over and over, not to let Preston's fear become her final answer about herself. That takes something that doesn't come from being certain things will work out. It comes from deciding to keep going even when you aren't certain. She did that without any guarantee. Just with the quiet, stubborn insistence that she was not finished yet. I'm not finished either. None of us are. That's the thing I want to remember when things get hard or uncertain, or when someone I care about is sitting alone in the dark deciding whether to trust again. The moment you stop and turn around, when you could have kept driving, when you choose honesty over comfort, when you hold someone firmly instead of carefully. Those moments are small. They don't feel important while you're in them. But they're the ones that matter most when you look back.